If you had a recent sexual experience that you are now regretting or that you're anxious about from a sexually transmitted disease or sexually transmitted infection point of view, do not run out and buy an STI test online. Just don't. I know it's telling you you can get your results tomorrow or the day after that. I know they're promising you HIV early detection, and that feels like the relief from this overwhelming amount of anxiety that you have. But virtually no good is going to come from that. And in fact, a lot of harm can come from it. So I'm going to talk to you about that right now. Okay. I have been in your shoes. I remember in college, which I must admit was 25 years ago now, I had sex with another student and I started to have these thoughts in my head about HIV. I was convinced that I had caught HIV. People were still dying of HIV back then, HIV and AIDS. And I was thinking about how I had ruined my life and, I wasn't going to have a family in the future. Nobody would want it. Like I was honestly going crazy. And that's embarrassing to admit now, but that's where I was. And it might be where you are. I mean, when I think about testing companies online that sell HIV early detection, they're catering to people like that, right? I mean, why else would they upcharge so somebody can find out right now about a very recent sexual experience? But there's something that we need to have a conversation about here, first of all. We'll just stop and focus on HIV. The likelihood that you contracted HIV is very low. When it comes to HIV, there are higher risk populations than others. But let's just talk about my example, and we will kind of figure out where you are together. Sound fair? I had sex with a, college freshman woman. The likelihood of someone in her demographic, a non-IV drug using, young, college educated, or at least getting a college education woman having HIV is astronomically low to begin with, because you can't get HIV unless the person you're having sex with has HIV. Okay, so that's the first thing. The likelihood that she had it to begin with was very low. Not zero. Some people like her do have it, but very, very low. And we have to be realistic about these things if we're going to overcome our anxiety. The next thing you have to realize is that her and I had penis and vaginal sex, unprotected, no condom. But do you know what the transmission rate of that is? 1 in 2,500. So if and only if she had HIV, the risk of me contracting it from that sexual experience was 1 in 2,500. Had I known either one of those things at that time, it would have given me such relief. Okay. But instead, you know what I did? This is really embarrassing. I was so convinced that I had HIV and I was broke, and I'm trying to figure out how to find out if I have this or not. Is my life over, or am I going to have a happy life? That sort of thing, that I actually seeked out a blood drive and donated blood because somebody had told me that if I have HIV, I would find out that way. It's utterly ridiculous. But I'm just making a point here, which is that the likelihood that you contracted HIV or really any STI from your sexual experience is not nearly as high as you think. And that may be different than what you've been taught in sexual education. It's definitely different than what you're going to hear from companies selling STI tests. And by the way, we're a company that sells STI tests, but it's true. This anxiety that you might be having about a recent sexual experience is just not worth the stress that you're putting on your body, because it's not a realistic concern. Well, it's a realistic concern for a lot of people for certain STIs, but it's not an emergency. For example, let's say that you did contract chlamydia, because about 1 in 15 sexually active young women in the United States today has chlamydia. So women between the ages of 17 and 24. That's what the research shows us. It's a relatively harmless, and what I mean by that is you absolutely want to get it treated. It's not harmless. It can cause infertility and a lot of other problems. But my point is it's not an emergency. It's never an emergency. Never, never, never an emergency. And we live in an age where every single STI in the United States is either manageable, even HIV, or curable. And so it's just not something that is worth the anxiety. Sex is supposed to be fun, right? You're either having sex to literally make a baby or to have fun. And in your case, it was probably to have fun, and hopefully you had fun. And let's not ruin it now because of anxiety. So why not run out and buy an STI test online just to find out anyway? Well, that's easy because you're not going to find out. Let's say this happened a week ago, right? And you can go ahead and get that HIV early detection, upcharge and get that. Oh, good, I don't have HIV. I spent all this money and you finally know you don't have HIV, which you almost certainly didn't have to begin with. But you're not going to know even basic information like, do I have gonorrhea or chlamydia? So let's talk about incubation periods. A lot of people want to know, okay, I had sex on the 4th of July, let's say. When can I get tested to find out if I caught anything during that encounter? Well, that gets to be a little tricky. Some of the infections like Mycoplasma genitalium, there's just not solid data on. It grows very slowly. But for some of it, like gonorrhea and chlamydia and HIV and syphilis and things like that, there is solid data on it, okay? So I could tell you a month. I could tell you that you can get tested a month after your exposure, and you're very likely to catch any of these things in your testing panel that you might have gotten. But here's the huge thing that you don't understand if you're about to buy a testing kit online, and this is so fundamentally important. Gonorrhea and chlamydia, for example, are site-specific bacterial infections, and those companies online that promise you fast results, and they can deliver you fast results, do not have throat swabs for gonorrhea or chlamydia. Why does that matter? These bacteria are site-specific bacterial infections. So you can have them in your anus if you have anal sex. You can have them in your genitals if you have genital sex. You can have them in your throat if you have oral sex. But you have to literally collect cells from each areas of those body. Those super fast testing kits that are not, they're not really kits. You go to the lab and get your blood drawn at like a Quest or a LabCorp. They do not offer throat swab testing. So you will never, ever, ever know your status on these super common bacterial infections like gonorrhea and chlamydia. And in fact, the research shows that genital-only testing is going to miss a huge percentage of those cases. Some studies point to most cases. So sure, you got fast results from one of those companies, but you still don't even know your STI status. I know the company says they test for gonorrhea and chlamydia, but I just told you that they don't do it in any sort of sensical way. If you had oral sex, if you've ever had oral sex, then you must get a throat swab to know your status. That is not negotiable. So you're always going to be trading off thoroughness for speed. And that is the stupidest trade-off you could possibly make, because I've already told you these things are not an emergency, right? What difference does it make if you get gonorrhea and chlamydia tested as fast as possible if you still don't even know your gonorrhea or chlamydia status? That makes no sense. So what is my advice to you, okay? As a telemedicine company that sells STI testing online, I'm telling you not to buy it. If I was in your shoes, right? I'm telling you not to buy it. I'm telling you to calm down, that this isn't an emergency. Well, there's lots of things that you can do. If you have casual sex, and maybe right now you're saying, I'll never do that again. I'm old enough to tell you, my friend, you probably will, because sex is pretty awesome and it's supposed to be awesome. I hope you do continue to have amazing casual sex and live your life in whatever way you choose. You just need to get on a systematic schedule of testing that works for you, it works for your budget. So maybe you live in a community with a great taxpayer-funded but free-to-you STI testing clinic. Great. go there every 6 months, let's say, right? And maybe one day you'll find out you have chlamydia, and in which case you'll get it treated, and it's not a big deal. It wasn't a national emergency that you had that potentially for a couple of months. It's just not. Some people have that for years, right? So it's not an emergency. Slow down. So you can do the free STI testing clinic. If you have a primary care physician, you can probably get testing there. If you go to our website, shamelesscare.com, up in the top menu, go to resources and then free STI testing. You will see a resource page there that you can screenshot it all you want. Take that into your doctor, say, I want these tests, please. And what you'll find out is that that list has things that these super duper fast testing companies don't even have, but that you are infinitely more likely to have than you are something like HIV, like a Mycoplasma genitalium, like a trichomonas, that are really also important to STIs. So pump the brakes. You're fine. You're going to have an amazing life. I hope you have an amazing life with all the fun sex that you want to have. There is absolutely no reason for you to be in a panic to get STI tested. And in fact, if you do buy an STI test as quickly as you can because you think that's going to address your anxiety, it's not, because you're not going to be tested properly in those situations because the incubation period hasn't been long enough. And also because the testing kit you're about to buy does not have things like throat swabs. If you like our message, be sure to follow the channel, drop us a like. I would really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.